Hello, my name is Willie Wisely, and welcome to Watercolor Editions, a music podcast that takes you deep inside a series of new acoustic singles I've created, celebrating 40 years of being a songwriter. Recording new versions of my songs has brought memories flooding back of what inspired each one, and I want to share those memories with you as we play the new Watercolor Edition and the original studio recording, and chat it all down. So now, sit back and let me paint a picture for you. In 1979, at age 14, I started playing in bands. My first show ever, a one-song appearance singing lead at the school talent show. I was a ninth grader at Minnetonka East Junior High, out west of Minneapolis. And in the moments before hitting stage, watching from the wings, as two guys did a choreographed unicycle routine, I knew I'd found my life's calling, and that was to rock. But it wasn't clear how I'd turn this knowingness into a life of stagecraft and hijinks. And as high school churned on, grades sliding, plus the persistent difficulty of keeping a band together, and topping that off with my parents' sensible suggestions about college, I was just feeling kind of irked. So by my 11th grade year, at an estimable prep school, watching classmates excitedly take their SATs and marching preparedly into their first appointments with school guidance counselor and recruiters from every vaunted college, I was filled with inexplicable loathing for my zealous classmates and really for the whole process. It just sickened me because I didn't want to think about or talk about or be asked about more school or more grades or more future. Boy, suddenly I remind myself of my 15-year-old daughter right now. Anyway, all I could think about was, honestly, all I could think about was this one girl. But because thinking about her was slowly slicing me in half, requiring the services of a therapist, that's a different story, all I could do to stay sane was play guitar, write songs, and schedule a cascade of band practices to fill the hours. Despite all that, I met with my first college recruiter from a place I'd never heard of with some weird name. It was in Wisconsin. He'd also be my last college recruiter I'd meet with. "You're the type of person we want at Beloit." And I said, "You mean someone with straight C's?" And he said, "No, we want people, not transcripts." He knew I starred in all the high school plays and musicals year on year. And upon the advice of my guidance counselor, Mr. Howard, I'd brought my lyric writing book with me, along with one of my earliest songs, all scored out in my own hand. The recruiter was impressed. So in a naive attempt to cool this guy off, I warned him, "I'm a ham." As if that was something dangerous. "Put down the ham and we'll all get out of here safely." So I continued. "My piano teacher always schedules me last at recitals, and not because I'm her best student, but because I have the moves." "Really?" he said. "Yep, my favorite song to play is Edvard Grieg, Concerto in A minor. But like my mom always says, you look like Stevie Wonder when you play it." Anyway, I could not shake this guy, and by the time I showed up in the freshman dorm at Beloit College in 1983, I felt pretty at home among the universe of misfits and delusional wannabe revolutionaries that they'd conscribed for a student body. I mean, the recruiter actually told me, and the resident assistants echoed it when we all showed up, that the 60s still live on at Beloit. Did everyone know I couldn't get laid in high school? Anyway, 2 years at Beloit, despite feeling right at home with all the kooks, and ultimately getting the moves put on me by more men than women, I found myself still pining for high school, for my band buddies, like magnetized to the nascent indie rock scene in Minneapolis. The Replacements had just popped out, and Husker Du and Soul Asylum, and, a little before that, The Suburbs and Sussman Lawrence, and a little bit after that, Trip Shakespeare and Jayhawks, and there was just so much great music in Minneapolis. And Beloit, for all its graces, was a small town with no music scene. So, by my junior year, I was taking courses at the U of M in the Twin Cities instead, renting a $159 room with my drummer friend from high school, Mike LaVille, in Dinkytown, a fabled neighborhood in southeast Minneapolis. We found a dilapidated house for rent, not 2 blocks away from where a teenage Bob Dylan played his first shows in 1959, at Minneapolis' very first coffee house, in fact, the 10 O'Clock Scholar, where Mr. Zimmerman would get the hook for his monotone voice. Yes. And by 1986, I'd moved in, and there were still old-timers out on the street busking, like the folk music revolution in the early 60s was still in full swing, which actually inspired me. So, I brushed off my favorite folksy covers, like Ooh La La by the Faces. Oh yeah. Joni Mitchell's Night in the City. Delicious. And of course, my own new songs. And I hit the street corner. My hair was 2 feet long. My 21-year-old brow without a crevice or a crack. Guitar case flung wide to the sky, poised for all the certain mana, as hundreds of biology majors scuffled past after class with 10-ton satchels of books, dead-eyed on their way home to pull all-nighters for a life of midterms, osteoporotic issues, and terrifying bobbed librarian haircuts. I was positively on the corner of 4th Street and 14th Avenue Southeast, across from where the Scholar stood, and in 45 degrees the other direction, across the other street, was Gray's Drug, where upstairs, Dylan had rented a railroad apartment after leaving the Jewish fraternity house and failing out of university. So, there I am, playing to no one, yet to everyone. And this was not something that was bolstering my confidence. It was not encouragement, nor was it remuneration. I think fatefully, it was during a particularly spirited version of Bob's You Ain't Going Nowhere that I negotiated a terrific bargain with myself to not ever do this again. Fast forward to heptad years later, and I'm on tour in New York City, playing a gig in a packed sidewalk cafe, courtesy of my fellow touring artists, Andras Jones and Sandman, Montana's rapping cowboy. It was a wondrous night. Manhattan was buzzing among my many friends and fans, and my wife's brother and sister-in-law were all there drinking. We stayed out late, took cabs, and spent the evening in Gotham as you can only do there. And in the subway station, headed home, I paused for a Peruvian pan flautist, playing for the black and white porcelain echoes and tips, and from the struggle of my own beginnings in Dinkytown, a lyric was born. It's a short walk down past Sidewalk Cafe, where the green line connects with blue. And it's hard work singing for strangers all day, but I do. Here's the watercolor edition of True, replete with a new middle eight I wrote specially for this version. This song is for everyone who seeks to hear an echo in this world.
It's a short walk down past Sidewalk Cafe, where the green line connects with blue. And it's hard work singing for strangers all day, but I do. If my song is good and my rent's past due, be the echo and ring the string, I just played with my thumb, but I tried. If my song is real, my weary due, be the echo and ring true, true, true. Be the echo, echo, sing along with me. That's why I make music, whoa, it's easy to see. Be the echo, echo, sing along with me. That's why I make music, whoa, it's easy to see. Be the echo, echo, sing along with me. That's why I make music, whoa, it's easy to see. Oh, easy to see. Oh, easy to see. Oh, it's easy to see. Well, my song is good. You can sing it too. Be the echo and ring true, 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 true.
That was True, the third release in my year-long series of acoustic singles. I call it the Watercolor Editions. You know, when talking songwriting, I always like to point out something technical, something for the songwriters out there or those of you intrigued by what it takes to make a song tick. So I've started a segment called Willie's Timeout Corner because it is so technically punishing, right? So usually I point out some element of music theory or some psychoacoustical aspect that explains why a song emotes, right? For True, it's the tempo of the song that's key to the song's origin on the streets. As we noted, the lyrics were inspired by the streets of Dinkytown in New York City. And there's even a reference to Dylan's Lay Down Your Weary Tune in the last chorus, little lyric quote. But the music elements of True come from a Hollywood moment. You see, the music was improvised actually, to Moving Picture of a young actor named Sean Gunn as he nervously skipped across a street in a short film called The Man Who Invented the Moon. I'd been hired to compose and record the score, and the rough cut came to me on a DVD in a package at my front door, and I watched it and was immediately struck at how adorable it was. There were bold Harold and Maude vibes, and I'm on board. So, obviously, I should be the Cat Stevens to this film, just as Cat had so elegantly soundtracked Hal Ashby's masterpiece. So, I let my fingers and a ganky acoustic guitar do the composing for me. And that would be the sonic through line. I improvised every scene, and some cues were like in 5/4 time, and some were rubato with shifting tempos, and others were less music and actually more just me doing sound design, stretching guitar strings to hear them pop off the edge of the frets as a character had a heart attack in a parked car. And one of the more mellifluous motifs was called Restaurant, because Sammy was crossing the street to go to a restaurant. And it was written for Sean's rather dysfunctional character, and as I mentioned, he was skipping across the street. The cue wound up working in other scenes too, and it wound up in several versions across the film. And well after The Man Who Invented the Moon was screened and socked away on an obscure Vimeo link, which is in the description here. That beautiful melody played in parallel intervals of sixths on the guitar neck, it just stuck in my imagination. I've actually released the soundtrack for streaming. You can hear it in its entirety. And I'd like to play for you the restaurant cue. So that was Restaurant from The Man Who Invented the Moon, a short film. And I'll tell you a little bit about the people that created it ever so shortly. So in 2004, after the New York gig and the whole subway scene with the Peruvian flautist, the need to write a song about busking was calling pretty hard. So marrying this tempo to the lyrics that I had born in New York, it just magically worked. So much of songwriting is just waiting for the correct collision to accidentally happen. How can something be correct and accidental? Very easily in songwriting. Footnote: The Man Who Invented the Moon was directed by John Cabrera, and it was written by Lee Kirk. The executive producer was Sean's brother, James Gunn, and this very inspired coterie of folks 5 years later would be the exact team who would make the music video for my song Through Any Window, which starred actress Jenna Fischer. So please check out both the film and the video. You'll dig them both. Links are in the podcast description. The original studio recording of True was released in 2012 on my album of the same name, True. And actually, the song was written exactly to the week 8 years before its release, which happens to be this week, the week I released this podcast. Ah, the stars align. Out of all my studio albums released in the 21st century, I think True is the most sonically adventurous, maybe by a long shot. And a lot of that is because I brought in my early 90s touring band to back me up in the studio. Peter Anderson on drums, James Voss on the upright bass, Greg Wold on trombone. We built a truly unique sound. And these cats, they were my street-fighting droogies. And this was called the Willie Wisely Trio, and even though there were four of us. And we played hundreds of shows all across North America. And we did it in a 1980s Dodge van, replete with interior shag carpeting and plywood paneling, pretty much everywhere except the dashboard. It was either originally painted burnt orange to begin with or very badly rusted. It's really hard to say. Our times together were very rich. Not financially, of course, but narratively. And it always breaks my heart a little bit that we'll have to go to our graves with our most ridiculous exploits left secret. There are, after all, innocent people to protect. Now, my vision for recording True was crystal clear. So I was more interested in producing the track from the control room than actually playing on it in real time. So before the session, I cut my acoustic guitar, and I cut my lead vocal, and I even cut the backing vocals. And then I sat with my co-producer, Ed Ackerson, at his famed Flower Studio on 29th Street in Minneapolis to focus on exactly how the band sounded. And honestly, Peter and James needed zero coaching. Our history together with this particular shuffle groove, actually, specifically, it dated back to almost 20 years earlier to 1990 at our very first session in a pro studio, recording my song St. Louis Blues. That was at Gary DeHaven's Parsley Peak studio. You have to understand that this was the 1990s Minneapolis, so little escaped the long shadow of the short man, Prince. So all I really wanted to ask of the boys was to let the middle section explode, as I'd be overdubbing a big electric guitar solo, and I just wanted it to become very intense. So as a placeholder to sort of rev things up, I had sung a couple tracks of steam train vocalization. that sort of thing, getting more and more intense. And we actually wound up, strangely, leaving that in the final mix. You can hear it. The horn parts would be absolutely key to illustrating the theme of the lyrics, which is hearing one's echo in an indifferent world, right? So I left nothing to chance, and I scored out the horns in advance. And I designed it so that the horns would respond to me, the lead singer, on every chorus, bouncing in after I sang Be the Echo and Ring, and, of course, the song's title, True, True. Call and response is a musical device that's been used for millennia, but perhaps most notably in the folk and blues canon, in the songs of like Chain Gangs and slave field hollers and church song and even the military. Anywhere where people need to lift their hearts, right, from this mortal coil. But in this case, I was channeling Van Morrison's use of horns in his classic Caravan. It's a delicious sound. Check it out. But even among the horns, even between the two horns, I wanted a sense of conversation. So Greg plays trombone, and he alternates licks during the instrumental section with Robert Russell, a wonderful tenor saxophonist who actually has a baritone sound. That's how cool that guy is. And he's a songwriter in his own right, too. Anyway, we met Robert in Milwaukee on the trio's first tour ever outside of Minneapolis in 1989. And I wanted to have people at this session who were of a certain pedigree among the musicians that I started with to conjure this deep musical chemistry. And I think it really worked. Notably, even our co-producer, Ed Ackerson, had run sound at all of our earliest shows. So it went deep here. So, with all that in mind, here's the original studio recording of True from my 7th studio album, released in 2012. Paint a picture for us, Willie.
It's a short walk down past Sidewalk Cafe, where the green line connects with blue. And it's hard work singing for strangers all day, but I do. If my
That was the title track off my 2012 album, True. You may have noticed a line in the song. It's a long day under the city of drones, but the heat lifts when trains speed by. And I can't hear the string, I just played with my thumb, but I try. These words speak very deeply to me. As we all try to hear ourselves in the din of this world, and all of us struggling to leave a mark somehow, to be heard, in the face of everyone droning by on their way to work or biology class, it's easy to lose yourself, to feel alone, ignored. But if you stay true to who you are, and true to the ideas that inspire you, and true to the person who you want to be, you will succeed. We will succeed. And to a large degree, I feel that my career in music is an example of that. It's not because I'm the most talented singer, I don't play the best guitar, but through sheer force of will and commitment, I'm standing here 40 years later telling you about watercolor editions. So wow, will your own thing into being. You can do it. So, if you liked what you heard, CDs of the album True are available at my Bandcamp page. I have proof that some of you still buy and listen to them. The album is a wild sonic adventure, and it's full of characters and stories, all of which I'm very proud. In fact, the last song on it is 27 minutes long. So, if that doesn't make you curious, I don't know what will. It's a record that I rather quietly released, that I feel doesn't get its due. So, at least check it out. It's streaming everywhere. True, from 2012. Lastly, hit the subscribe button, would you? And don't miss the next Watercolor Edition podcast, when we'll put my song Rain Can up on the easel. It's a song I wrote in 1991 about a particularly violent and troubling summer in Minneapolis. We'll paint that watercolor picture, play the new version, and the original studio versions in the case of Rain Can, and chat it all down again on Watercolor Editions. I'm Willie Wisely, and thanks for listening.